Information Security Hot Tub, Episode 5, Coming Out, Being Yourself, and Being an Ally at Work.
Hi, everybody. My name's Caitlin. I don't know. This is actually my first time joining one of these talks, and I'm pretty psyched to be here. I thought this was a really important topic, and it seems to be a theme in conversations I've been having lately, either hearing horror stories about people coming out in the office and the way it's handled, or people discussing the best way to go about it. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because I feel like we can all learn something, and we can all do better, and we can all, find better ways to navigate this. Alyssa?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Alyssa Miller. When Caitlin brought this topic up, I we had a lot of discussion, and I kind of felt like I definitely needed to be a part of this conversation because I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been the one coming out at work. I've been the one watching as others have come out at work, and I've seen the good, I've seen the bad. I sound like I'm singing the theme song to The Facts of Life. That's great. And now you all know how old I am because I just said that. But yeah, I think it's a really important topic. It's one of those things where there are even those who try really hard to be great allies and to really support people. There's just little hidden things sometimes even that come up that you might not even realize. And I think it's just important to put those things out there so people are aware of them. And for those who really want to be allies and want to help others be themselves at work, there's just a lot of important conversation I hope that we'll have tonight. Sai, I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So my name is Rose. I am coming from the perspective of being a lesbian woman. I like to try to refer to the LGBT community as the queer community because it's a little bit more inclusive in my opinion. Just like Alyssa was just saying, some things you're aware of, some things you're not aware of. That you do, and allyship is kind of different for everybody, and I think there's some things that we can all kind of echo that are similar, but even within our own community, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that we can talk about and answer questions about and things like that, and hopefully it doesn't offend anyone within the community that I use the phrase queer. I mean, some people like it, some people don't. But I want to be as inclusive as possible in that world. I have, I came out when I was 15 years old, so I've only ever known one side of it. And I know it's like going into a new job even and having to put a same-sex partner on your benefits and like the drop in your stomach, waiting to see how the reaction to that is. And I can tell some of my horror stories, and I can see how we've been treated differently. And we obviously have come a long way. And I think, Alyssa, you said you were giving away your age, but I think that you can speak from a perspective like I can too. In the last 10 years, things have changed so much. In the last 15, 20 years, like we're living a completely different reality. So allyship there isn't a manual on it. There's never going to be a manual on it because this is something that changes all the time. So that's who I am. I'm a pen tester, so not nearly as acclaimed as Alyssa and some of the others, but I'm just a newbie in the space, and I can just speak from that perspective.
Well, I just want to say that I think you're a pen tester is awesome. I'm just impressed with that. But when you were talking, you said you prefer to refer to the LGBTQ community. It kind of broke up a little bit when you were saying what you prefer to call it. So I didn't get
the
to
queer
hear
community.
Queer
Yeah,
community.
the queer community. Yep.
Okay, for some reason it sounded like you said pre. I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? That would be a whole, maybe we can make it a trend. Yeah, no, I go with queer just because it has turned a bit into an alphabet soup lead, in my opinion. So like we started with, LGBT, and then we added QIA and all those things, and then now the plus, and I feel like we have developed so much, and we're putting ourselves in a box by trying to add letters. So I just retaking queer.
I like the inclusivity of it, but I mean, I'm coming from I'm bisexual, but basically I'm married to a man. I, tend to be a little bit more, just
passable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just seem, a little bit more straight. So I just really, am more coming from the ally side. Now, the word queer, that used to be a slur at one point, wasn't it? Because that's something that's changed more recently. Right?
Yeah, it has, and I think it's just so like that's a perfect example of like how we can apply that to allyship. Is that's one of those words that have a lot of connotation behind it, depending upon how you're saying it. If somebody says like, "Oh, I'm supportive of the queer community," and you're an ally, that doesn't upset me. That doesn't offend me. It might upset and offend other people, but even like that, like that's where we get into the kind of mud in the water where we're talking about we don't really have a manual on how to be the best ally. So it's really just like how you speak about it. But yeah, it used to be a slur, and a lot of people are reclaiming it and reusing it as a way of being a bit more inclusive and just to take the power away from it.
Awesome. I'm already learning something new.
And other people feel differently about it. Like, and this is, I was actually just speaking to my wife about this, how there's a lot of people in the community that are a part of the community that may not identify as any form of gay, right? So we have our trans brothers and sisters who, there are some of those people who are straight people, who are, a trans woman who that might be, considered straight. And so it's just it's an interesting topic because we are such a big group of people in a community that we have to just work together to figure it out, even within ourselves.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's an extremely diverse community, and I feel like it's important to remember that each individual person might not necessarily agree with like what the standards are, and they may ask for something that's a little bit different. I guess it's really subjective to who you're interacting with, and it's something I think when we're talking about these things, we all want to remember this is not set rules.
Written
There's
in
no
stone.
set rules.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
I think the only rule that I think can apply to every single thing is all it takes is asking, and you will get the answer. So no one is going to be mad at you for saying the wrong thing as long as you're saying it with kindness, and then if you get corrected, that you receive that feedback positively.
Awesome.
I mean, I think this speaks to just we as humans have this really interesting to put everything in its neat little boxes, right? And we want to know that one standard way to talk about things, or that we want those patterns. We want, and anything that doesn't match those patterns becomes problematic for us. And I mean, that's where the queer community kind of has been a challenge for people who don't necessarily have a strong awareness of these issues, if you will. I hate to call them, it's not even issues, but just the myriad of ways that people can just simply exist. And it doesn't fit all the neat little boxes that we've been so conditioned to be used to. And that alone makes it really, really challenging. I know, and it's challenging for allies. I mean, to Rose's point, how we've got this whole alphabet soup thing where we try to put all of these letters in there to represent all the various people who we consider a part of this queer community, And, maybe it's just we need to get away from the whole idea just in some respects and just understand that we're just human beings. And these adjectives that, sort of describe one small element of our overall existence are not, they're not the things that define us. And so, it's a new way of thinking for allies. It's a new way of thinking for everybody that, traditionally hasn't been a part of the human experience to think about things that way.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to kind of add in a few bits. My name's Emily. Hi, I am queer. I feel like I'm in I don't know, just announcing that. Apologies. I was just listening to what you were just saying about queer being a slur, and in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent, yes, it's 2 a.m. Is that queer has been around, and I was looking it up to make sure that I got it factually right, but it's been around since 16th century. Scottish language meaning strange or peculiar. And apparently, I didn't realize this, but in the US, it's come up in the 20th century. So over in the UK, obviously, it's been known about from time. But we've kind of reclaimed it as from the fact that they were saying about slurs. But I actually quite like being called queer now, because I actually do feel like I'm, I don't know, included, like you were saying about the whole alphabet soup, because I'm pansexual. And there's no letter in the alphabet in the mixture for me.
Not yet.
So, not yet, no.
Yeah.
No. I'm working out where I can put it in there.
It's got to look good, right? It's got to look aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. Because I did actually question that, and I would love to know someone's opinion about the word gay towards people. So I don't know if I'm classed as gay. Am I? I don't know.
I think yes and no. If you want to be, it's about what you want to be, right? If it matters that I mean, when I first came out, I came out to a gay man, and I said I'm gay, and he goes, "No, you're not. You're a lesbian." And that was his reaction to me. So it's it didn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. I think the point being, if you want to call yourself that, if you're comfortable calling yourself that, that's a big umbrella term too. Most people understand what that means, and obviously it's being used a lot, especially lately in the news. So I think that if you want to be
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was my 2 pennies. I'm sorry that I interrupted. I hope that was okay.
No, thank you for introducing yourself and for sharing that perspective, because most of us that are speaking are here in the US, so it's really cool to have that multi-country thing going on.
I've got insomnia going on here. This is what's happening.
Yeah, Emily, I have no idea what you're doing up this late at night.
See, that's why the queer works, because we're all just a little bit peculiar, right? So
I'm strange and unusual,
right? But
yes, most definitely.
The point of bringing it up to our allies and stuff like that is because we probably have more allies than we do people in the community. So, I mean, if anyone has questions about how to navigate an awkward situation, please ask, because I think that we all have a good perspective on it, and we're all happy to answer. But I think really the key to being the best ally is just be okay with feedback. So each person is so different in so many different ways, and I even make mistakes too. Like some people there's parts of our community I'm not even 100% familiar with, but if you're out, somebody says, my wife, my partner, my whatever, first try to avoid looking shocked is a good place to start, because I get a lot of the shock. I don't know about you guys, but if somebody feels comfortable to talk about their spouse or something like that, they're open to bringing you into their space. So just be cool about it, and maybe not the first reaction being like, oh yeah, I have a gay cousin, and you know.
Yeah. The first reaction should also not be, knew it, called it. Called it.
One thing I love is like how much I've been seeing people say just partner. And you don't know, it's like their romantic partner, their work partner, their partner in crime.
Oh,
I mean, it's exciting.
that's why I hate it. I hate it. Oh my
Really?
God, I hate it. But that's just me. That's like anyone in the community can do whatever they want. And I appreciate straight people using the phrase partner, but I will never call my wife partner because it makes me feel like I'm like calling her my business partner. So like I use the phrase wife, and that like bothers the ever loving God out of people sometimes. So like when I get partner, people are like, "Oh yeah, this is my partner," and I'm like, "Oh God, now it's the guessing game. Now it's the what do you mean by partner guessing game?" Like,
is that their name? Are they actually called partner?
others, which is, and I have no problem with people using it. Like, I've never been upset or offended by somebody using it. I just like will never use it because to me, my wife is my wife. You know.
My wife. Well, there's a film for that. Yeah, the whole partner thing. The first thing that goes through my head is howdy partner. But maybe that's just because I'm immature. I don't know, or maybe it's just because I'm strange. But yeah, I started off being an ally initially, not realizing I was queer. I've not been out for that long, really. Probably about 4-5 years. And I came out to a gay man as well. And I just turned to him and said, I think I might be something that's not straight.
That's a good way to describe it.
I'm still figuring out what I am. I actually I've always identified as bisexual, but now that pansexual, is becoming more and more common, I still kind of don't understand the difference. I don't know what I am. I'm just kind of gay.
I don't know about anyone else, but in the UK, if you ever say to people that are potentially not an ally, really, are not really familiar with gay terminology and like they don't know what to say, people think that I'm in a relationship with the objects in my kitchen. I'm not joking there.
I've heard people say that to people here too.
Sorry, there was an overlap.
Oh, I said I'm sure people make that comment here too in the United States.
Oh, okay. The stupidity exists everywhere. Cool. Okay.
We produce it in this country.
There's U.S. We have a little bit of it's our main export.
Yeah.
Someone actually did ask me, does that mean that you're F-bombing things in the kitchen?
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, wow. Oh, wow. Did you actually say that? Wow.
So
I would have
Tim
been
has joined us.
Smart ass if someone said that to me. I'd have been like, well, the counters are the perfect height.
So Tim's joined us and his hand raised. Hi, Tim.
Hello, Alyssa. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I was wanted to just chime in a little bit on kind of discussing like the word or the usage of partner. And I think, for my situation especially, so my partner is non-binary. They're a non-binary feminine. They go by they, she, but it never quite right to call Danielle my girlfriend. So, they're my partner. And I think that kind of encompasses a lot of folks in, kind of standard non-traditional relationships, like, especially if they're not, don't have a legal piece of paper with it. And
that's a really good point. I was thinking about bringing that up about not every relationship is just one person and one person. Relationships now, it's more acceptable to just be poly and to have every relationship in every size. So partner's kind of a really inclusive term.
And I think too, it's inclusive of, different relationship styles, whether monogamous or not, and different, different various, we don't have words, I feel like, for everything that's not, that are gender inclusive. And so partner kind of, it's like y'all, it just kind of includes everybody in all the circumstances. I also want to call out, because it's just who I am, that it is, Black History Month, and we're talking about queerness, a panel full of like white folks. So I figured maybe it would be cool to have a Black person on here who can talk about, queerness and Blackness, and like, especially in the, theme or whatever of intersectionality, because, just because someone does identify as queer or LGBTQ plus, that doesn't alleviate them from being either the perpetuator or victim of other kinds of marginalization. And I think that's kind of like a lot of unspoken thing outside of that, where folks look at the LGBT community or queer community as even a monolith. It's like, well, you're LGBTQ. It's like, yes, but also, you still see there's still a lot of racism or colorism or fat shaming or transphobia or all kinds of things like that within the queer community itself. So, we need to, I think not only have to ally and advocate for folks outside of this community, but for within it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm actually really glad, Tim, that you joined in and brought that up, because it is absolutely easy to forget just that intersectionality across and how that matrixes, in every aspect, right? I mean, if you take the queer community, as it were, and you apply that, and you have to understand that anytime you have a subdivision of the population, it's still a subdivision of the population. So all the other aspects that impact the rest of the population are going to impact that smaller community that's just a portion of it. And so, to that end, it's a really important thing to remember and to see that and to acknowledge it. And I mean, we can't even deny the level of infighting, even just that occurs between those different letters of that alphabet soup, as well, right? I mean, there's just all of the various ways that people can still find to others. They're going to do that, and it's something we need to be aware of and work to eliminate.
Just having Tim mention about, obviously, non-binary, one of the things that I did recently. So I'm self-employed. I run my own business, and I was setting up some items that I could take to conference with me that I could hand out. So I decided to take pronoun badges with me, and I had created she, her, he, him, they, them, and ask me. Honestly, I had one person that was just so over the moon that I had they, them badges. They almost cried. And they were just so thankful for it. So at work, obviously the ability to show that they were they, them, at a work conference, just made my entire, the cost of them just go out the window. I was just like, I don't care anymore. I've made it. As far as I'm concerned, the badges have paid for themselves just by this one person being so touched by being able to show that they wanted their pronouns as they, them.
And I think that's important, like that recognition of others within the community, because like I'm obtusely cisgender, right? But I still use pronouns because I want that to be a thing. That's where someone lists their pronouns and then they're respected. And to, and I have myself have been corrected when folks get or when I misgender folks, and I'm like, you know what, I don't take offense. I don't try and defend it because it's not a thing that needs. There's nothing to defend. I made a mistake and I'm going to fix that. And just to make sure to make that a normal thing to do, to model that for others, especially as you're more senior in the community, more senior in, the work field or whatever. I think it really helps out to make that just a thing that happens without having to make a big deal of it.
I think a lot of people who especially are coming from outside of the community who have situations like that where they accidentally misgender somebody or they accidentally speak incorrectly, their immediate reaction is defense because they didn't necessarily mean to do that, and they almost overcorrect. And like even what I was saying is like within the community there is a lot of letter fighting, we'll call it maybe, where like my experience and our own experiences are solely our own experience. Like I can only speak as being a member of the queer community gendered. So like that is a challenge or a part of my life that I'm not experiencing. So like I am constantly open to having like my fellow community members who are trans and non-binary and things like that come into my world and educate me. And I think really that's the whole point, is just being somebody who can be educated.
Yeah, the defensiveness is a huge thing, right? And to be fair, I don't mean to minimize it, because it is. The immediate response from most people is when you get corrected to become defensive. I didn't mean that, or then there's the over apologetic ones. But I think some of it too is, there are times where we see it in the media, where we see it other places, where people will make what might have been a legitimate mistake, and it can be reacted to very harshly. And I remember, so my oldest child is non-binary as well, and I can remember how they, especially as they were first really, shortly after they had come out to me and to the family, a lot of their reaction when they would get misgendered or see other things where people use terminology that was problematic or whatever, was to respond immediately with really just severe venom, absolute anger, absolute frustration. And I think, over time I've watched them, they've learned ways to approach that in a less confrontational fashion. But I think that that's natural, because the thing that is important, especially for, those that wouldn't consider themselves queer, who, haven't been through that experience of self-realization and coming out and that sort of thing, is how much society forces us, whether you're trans, whether you're, gay, bisexual, whatever, wherever you fall in that beautiful myriad of, aspects of your existence, you've been forced, because of the way society is on the whole and the way people react to those types of things and the way that we've forced people to hide this, you've been forced to repress it. You've been forced by society. You've probably been bullied either directly as a result of it, because if people became aware that you were trans or you were this or whatever, or because the fact of who you were and the fact that you were trying to hide it caused you to behave in ways that weren't part of society's expectations of you. So, as a trans woman, I can speak to that, of course, as a child, what it was like growing up, knowing that this stuff was wrong, not having people to talk to about it, not expecting anybody would understand it, but also realizing that I could never be like everybody in my class expected me to be, because they perceived me to be a boy. And so I think for allies, I know it can be daunting, I guess. It can be frustrating when that venom comes out. But what I'm trying to suggest here is, please just have that empathy to understand that a lot of times that's where that comes from. It's you're talking to somebody who might be dealing with years of trauma that has been the result of that. And so now that they've finally had that self-actualization and they're living authentically,
They'll
it's
fight for it. Yeah.
yes. And it's hard to have those triggering reminders of what they went through to get to that point.
One perspective I think would be interesting for allies to think of too is that we grow up lacking the verbiage for any of this. Where we grow up in a world where it's you're going to get married to a boy, or you're going to do this, you're going to have kids, you're going to do this, and like there's no education around what we are or who we are or how we're feeling. Like Alyssa, especially yourself, and I'm sure you spent many years not even having the verbiage to even describe what you were experiencing. And like same with me as well. My time period, it wasn't until I saw it in media that I even understood what was going on through me and what I was seeing. And I'm sure other people can mimic that as well.
Oh, sure. And not only just the language, but then, like you said, you see it in the media. And what does that
like,
do to
what?
you? Well,
Yeah.
so here's an interesting perspective that I do share with people, in these conversations. So yeah, very early in my life, there was a concept to me, right? Before my teen years, there was no concept of even was. I didn't understand the way I felt. I didn't have words for it. I started to find the words for it was when I saw it on shows like Jerry Springer and Phil Donahue, which then, it was like, yeah, there were words to describe it, but they treated us like punchlines to a joke. They treated us like, we were the freaks. You saw the like reveal episodes where, yeah, we're dating, but I used to be a man kind of shit. And
oh yeah, and like even now, everyone's understanding of the trans community, like conservative people for the most part, understanding of the trans community, when they think of this nonsense bathroom bills and that's going on, they think of a man in a dress and not a trans person. Like they're thinking of this ridiculous bastardized image of what you are, and insanity, like that's what has been portrayed to the media, and they're not understanding. And then like I have the same problem with like lesbian things. They're the dyke, they're the joke, they're the this, they're the that, like I completely relate to what you just said.
I don't want to be rude, but I actually do probably have to get some sleep before I'm. It actually is time to wake up, and I'm still here. And so I didn't want to be rude and just drop off, but I also am now being very British and backing out slowly.
Get some sleep. It's really late. I don't know how you're up this late.
Thank you so much for listening to me, and it was great being in the hot tub, and hopefully maybe I'll see you another time. So thank you very much, and great chat, and I look forward to listening to the rest because I see it's on record.
Colleen, I saw that you added in. Do you wanna jump in and say anything?
Yeah, I pretty much have to echo almost everything Alyssa said there. I mean, it's like, because Alyssa and I are pretty much the same age, so coming up, we didn't have words, we didn't have the internet. It was like taboo. I mean, especially when we were young, it was looked at, I mean, when I came out to my mom, she described it as sexual deviance. So, that's kind of her thinking from her generation. So, like, up until the internet and people started coming together and like forming the language in the communities, it was too scary to like even consider coming out back then. At least for me, it was safer to just have the family and live the life that you were given or whatever, besides the one that you wanted to have or chose.
I had a similar experience with my mom. She told me that my first girlfriend was trying to give me AIDS.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, really very warm reception.
But see, these are important lessons that I would ask those that want to be allies to understand. So you've heard a lot of what that experience was like for us as we've sort of described, coming up through life. Imagine now you've gone through this situation. You had, as a young child, you hadn't described it. Then you found out what it was. But you were you realize that I really don't want to admit that that's who I am because it makes me this freak or this butt of people's joke, whatever else. It's going to subject me to all this harsh treatment. Sooner or later, you get to that point where it's like you just can't stand to hide it anymore. And now you're going to come out. So you've accepted it for yourself, but now you've got to look at your family and how is that going to impact your family? And, is your family going to reject you? How are your kids going to respond? And it doesn't matter if we're talking about, coming out as, about your gender identity, your sexuality, whatever. These are all the concerns you have. So think about somebody who's overcome all of that, who's gone through all of that, and has finally built up the courage to come out first to themselves, then to their family, then to their friends, and now
and
you have to do it
after that.
Right.
Every day
Right.
after that.
It's like they
Now
tip the scale in their own favor like that. Eventually it ends up so much to where they just can't. They can't live more. They have to come out. It's like
right,
they have to take the chance of losing their family members and all that at some point, I think.
But where I was going with that, though, is imagine now if that's a coworker of yours, since that was kind of what we were talking about here, is that coming out at work. Imagine after going through all of that, now you have to look at your job and you have to come out at your job.
Am I going to be fired? Am I going to be bullied? Am I going to be an experience I shared with our messaging group is that I was made to prove that I was legally married to my wife, and another straight man said, "Oh, my girlfriend, I call her my wife. I want to have her and her 2 kids covered." They never verified that he was responsible for the children at all. Got insurance, had 0 hoops to jump through. I had to show my marriage license before they would even consider giving me Ben. Every single time I spoke to that HR person after that, she was nasty, nasty, nasty to me. So.
Yeah, I had the same for me at one company. I had to sign an affidavit stating that because we weren't married, and they did cover, I think they termed it
domestic
life partners or something like that. Yeah, we had to sign this whole affidavit and go through this whole thing. And like you said, I mean, someone says, "Yeah, I just got married," and or whatever. It was fine if it was opposite sex couples, and even if they weren't married, all they had to do was say they were domestic partners. And I had literally talked to somebody who had that same experience. He and his girlfriend, had been together long enough that that was his declaration. Didn't have to go through any of the steps that I did to get my partner covered. And it's so, and then. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, we could probably talk for hours, and maybe it's worthwhile. I don't know, but just the hidden things that you would never think of as as someone who's not had to go through the experience of coming out at work, and for you might be sitting there and thinking, oh well, if you're gay or you're lesbian or you're if it's a sexuality thing, you don't even have to come out. You can just, you don't have to tell anybody. That's not true. Obviously.
Yeah, it feels like you're lying every day.
Right.
Every day. Yeah. And like you come, back from a weekend and say, "Oh, how was your weekend?" It was fine. It was fine. Okay. So I can either say I spent the time doing this with my wife, but the second you say partner or something like that, if you are trying to not tell people, they're going to probably assume, and then you become a part of gossip. And as a gay woman, one of the biggest experiences that I always get, even like at work, is people start asking me horribly inappropriate questions. And I'm sure Alyssa and Colleen, you guys experience, I'm sure. I can't even imagine the freaking questions that you get. But you get these questions, and it's like suddenly I just got invited into your bedroom because you said wife, and it's like, wow, how is this okay at work? And then I've been in a situation where it was like I had coworkers ask me these questions, and then I said yeah, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to talk to you about that, and then I'm problematic, and I'm the issue. So
yeah, and it's true, and then you'll have those people. They'll say, well, I didn't mean anything by it, or I was well-meaning. And a lot of them, they are. It's a lot of times it's curiosity or just a serious lack of awareness for just how inappropriate the question is, or just how much it's not any of their business.
Right, because instead of inviting someone into your bedroom, you're inviting them into your pants, basically.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, what surgeries are you going to have? That's always like the first question. have you had the surgery? That's my favorite one. Like,
As
what?
if that validates
Do
you
people
more.
realize that they're basically just asking you about your genitals? Like, how fucking inappropriate.
But see, they don't connect it. And that's the really odd thing. For some reason, they don't connect that, like, me, if you've had this surgery, is me asking you what genitals you have. And that's a really fucked up thing to ask somebody. Like, you wouldn't go up to a cisgendered man and just say, hey, so how do you think your dick really is? Like, you wouldn't ask them questions like that.
I mean, I might, if we're being honest, but
I mean, I'm hoping somebody you would know better, or somebody that you're really
and then, like,
upset with.
straight dudes make a really awkward joke about it. Then, like, that's okay. But that's like even me as a part of the community, I'm still learning how to navigate like all of the trans experiences that you guys are having. And baby me would have asked that question, and I asked somebody one time, and they're like, I'm going to answer this question because we're close friends, but don't ever fucking ask someone that. Like, are you crazy? And like explained it to me, and I was like, oh my God, like, I thought we'd be kind of like, no, like that's just not a question to ask. So we all have an opportunity to learn here, always.
Yeah, and that's a thing, right? I mean, that's an important facet too. Again, regardless of who it is that you're talking to, it could be a completely cis, straight person, whatever. There are those limits on, like, I've told people I don't hide the fact that I'm trans, right? I mean, I make a secret of it, but it also doesn't mean I go around broadcasting it, right? Like, I mean, anybody who watches me on social media or anything, that is not the thing I lead with. I don't, I bring it up as a topic from time to time when there's relevant things that need to be discussed, but I don't lead with it. And so it's like just being respectful of each person has that autonomy to decide what they wear and what they don't. There are plenty of my friends who know quite well exactly what surgical procedures I have and have not had. And, we talk about those things. I don't talk about it in the general forum of, Twitter or anywhere else, because it's not people's business. And if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. The word trans is an adjective. The word gay is an adjective. The word, all of those words that we put in there ultimately become an adjective. They're one facet, one small piece that describes the overall existence that we each embody. And so for me, it's always been really important that, I don't want to be seen as that, the trans hacker in security or, shit like that. No, I'm just, I'm here. I'm a woman. That end of story, and so I think just, as an stand that when people choose to share part of that with you, they're trusting you. And it's not even any difference whether they're queer or not. So asking people that is like asking them to give up that autonomy and putting them on the spot to maybe share information that they're just not they don't have a desire to share.
I'd say one of the easier questions that you can always go with too is that if that sort of thing comes up. So like in my case, like if I say my wife, a great question is, tell me about your wife. Like, tell me about your partner. Like, what are they like? What do they do? Like the same thing you'd ask other people, like, oh, what's your husband like? What's your whatever like? And I mean, I have questions that I would love to ask like Alyssa and Colleen about InfoSec and experiencing it as a cisgendered person and then now experiencing it as the other gender. But those are questions that if they were comfortable answering them, they would answer them. But I would never want like to make that the whole experience for you. And like, I would never want anyone to make me being gay. I mean, being gay is a huge part of it because I'm like obsessed with my family and things like that. But just ask normal questions, and it doesn't have to be focused around like their differentness.
Right. You are more than what that, lifestyle choice or, that defines you. And, I agree with Alyssa, and I kind of look at it a little bit differently in the fact that, I kind of want everybody to know that I'm trans just because I'm at the point where I'm like, damn, I don't have anything to lose, right? My kids are adults now. I'm divorced. I'm like in my late 40s, so I'm kind of like, I don't want people to judge me for it, but I want people to know, because I wanted to try to, have the conversation and have people think about it. And then, to me, I've been like the first trans person that so many people met. So, I don't want to say ambassador or anything, but like I try to be to that aspect, where it's like to make it easier for the next generation so they don't have to go through the same crap that we did.
Yeah, I was going to say, it just makes it easier for someone else to feel more comfortable being themselves, seeing you truly just be yourself.
Right. Yeah. But you can't expect every trans person to want to define themselves as a trans person like Alyssa. I mean, it's like, she has every right to be like, I'm a woman and that's how you should see me. And, it's like, that's completely valid. And for me, I'm like, I'm a trans woman, this is how I am. This is how you should see me. And they're both, equally the same thing. So, they're talking about like the alphabet soup, and there's such a spectrum in our community, and like with trans and with gay and with, you were talking about poly and bi and all that, right? It's just, there's so much. It's just, it's so much so fast. I think a lot of people are having trouble with it.
Yeah, within the community too, we have trouble with it. And like, I personally am very out, because I want somebody to be able to say, look at that person who's living this way, and like a kid to see it or something like that. Like, I want to be a strong female lesbian that can be an example for somebody who's younger. And that's why I'm also extremely out as well. And it's not that some people have misinterpreted it as like being flamboyant and being really in your face about it. And it's like, it's the same thing as like being proud of something that you are, and you want to influence that world. And like, I want to be the reason that a gay kid feels comfortable being that.
Right, but on the same note, you should be able to like go incognito and be like, I'm just a woman today, or I'm just a non-binary today. I'm not here to represent my community. I'm here to just enjoy myself, or whatever it is.
Well, there's a lot of that aspect too. You talk about like, do you have the energy to deal with the questions or to do education for folks that don't know? And like for my friends, especially for my friends, like again, for me, it's like being, either the only queer person at work is a lot like being the only Black person at work, except it's more obvious that I'm Black than that I'm queer. And so some days when folks will ask like, hey, I just wanted to know how you're doing because whatever happened on the news, or I had a thought, and if you get a chance, I just want to know what your thoughts are on something, is a lot different than going, hey, Tim, you're Black, let me ask you this question, right? And so having the same thing, having the same sensitivity for folks that are LGBTQ, like if there is something that they want to share with you, they're going through, and you can be respectful of whatever answer they give you. If you say, hey, can I ask you a question about something, right? Understanding that we're all whole fucking people, so we're not always just going to have the spoons to deal with that, right? I think it's very interesting. Something that I heard a straight person say on TV the other day was that, there are, a million ways to be queer, right? But straight people are basically taught that there's one way to be straight. So there is going to be a lot of curiosity about our lifestyle and how we view things, because we are dramatically different in some ways than they are, even though a lot of us are the same. And maybe they know one person who's gay that's their neighbor, and then maybe they know one other person who's trans, but your experiences are not monolithic. So and there is going to be curiosity. And so I understand that, and I'm sympathetic and empathetic to that. But also, right, I don't have the energy all day long to deal with that. So sometimes it's going to be like, you know what, man, not today, really not today. And other times we'll be like, yeah, let me give me a few minutes and we'll talk about this thing. And the end, as an ally, both answers have to be okay.
You actually touched on something too that's really important to me there, Tim. Which, first of all, I apologize. I kind of laughed, and I laughed just because of the absurd, because I know that people do that, right? And, it's honestly, it's ridiculous, because usually what I've found, and you can tell me if it's the same for you in your experience, either as a gay man or wow, let me try that again. As a Black man, and being in that environment, versus, how I experience as a trans woman, when they ask that question in that way, right? Hey, hello, Alyssa, you're trans. Let me ask you this question. This is where I think allies, you do need to be careful. Like, Tim is one gay man. He is or one Black man. Why? I'm all over the map here tonight. I don't know what's wrong with me. Tim does not speak on behalf of the entire population of Black people. I don't speak on behalf of the entire population of trans people. Rose does not speak on the entire population of lesbian people. So understand that when you pose a question like that, there's a really shaky line there between asking us about our experience and asking us to tell you what every trans person experiences, or every Black person experiences, or every lesbian experiences. Very different. And that can be a really problematic thing. I mean, because we will get those questions, and and sometimes that leads to the exhaustion of, hey, you know what, Alyssa, my friend's kid just came out as trans. Can I ask questions about it? A lot of times the answer is yes. I'm happy to help, and because I know what that kid is dealing with, and I can only imagine what their parents are dealing with. And, I want to help, but yeah, at the same time, understand, to Tim's point, there's going to be times where it's just, no, I don't have the energy to do that, because it does take a lot of energy.
Something that you said made me also think of this too. As an ally, please do not ever out anyone. If you think that they're trans, if you think that they're gay, if you think that they're whatever, do not go up to them and ask them in like, oh, are you trans? Are you gay? Are you this? Like, when they're ready, they'll tell you, and never, ever, ever talk about it or gossip about it behind somebody's back, because it can be extremely dangerous in their lives, and it can be extremely dangerous in their workplace. You were just saying something that you said just made me think of there's this phrase that is used within the community called passing, and like, oh, well, that person passes as this gender, person passes as straight, or that person, like, you even mentioned it to Caitlin, like, she's perceived as somebody who's straight. Even if it's like obvious to you, always be careful as an ally. Just as a thought before we end this,
No, that's really important. Like, that's a big deal. I remember back in the 90s, it used to be like super common for like gossip magazines and stuff to just out people. And like, that is horrible.
Yeah.
And it's always shocking to me to look back on those times and realize, like, holy shit.
Well, it's really fun when you're dating somebody and you're friends with one of and that friend chooses to warn them of you. Okay, I mean, these are things, it is amazing to me sometimes where people will feel that it's okay to out somebody. And like, okay, so if I'm dating a guy, or I'm dating a woman, or I'm dating whomever I choose, for you to them and say, hey, just so you know, she's trans. One, that's between the two of us, right? I mean, that is between me and whoever it is I'm dating. That's for me to share. And it is for me to decide when the right time is to share. And it is for us to settle that between the two of us, not for you to jump in. But for some reason, there's this weird need that people have that, like, oh, I know that, I've got this coworker and this new person starts, and, the coworker right away has to make sure that person knows that I'm the trans person on the team. And
well, it's almost like the gay panic or something like that. It's like people fear that or some similar response.
Yeah, it's.
And people have been killed for that. They have been killed because there've been experiences where people get outed and the person who they outed them to are violent and angry and lose their freaking minds. And then, like, especially within the dating scene, I've heard people who I know within the community have violent reactions to people finding out that they're trans. And like these choices to out yourself to dating, to coworkers, to whoever, it's our choice, and we have to be safe and we have to protect each other. So as an ally, it's important for you to protect. And in your opinion on when we come out and when we do this, it's not valid. We will do it when we're ready.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is really important to mention is that there's quite a few states still where it is an accurate, or it's a court recognized defense to murder if they find out that someone is trans. Like there's the trans panic defense is it's horrible. And yeah, courts have let people off for murder because they found it somehow justifiable. And yeah.
Well, it's a justifiable way to, like, you know, if you're caught with a trans woman, to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, kill her because she tricked me into this lifestyle or what have you or whatever. I mean, and a lot of them have fallen down and they're, you know, clearly it's ridiculous. But
yeah, it's something that's got to change. But I'm saying, yeah, that's how dangerous it is to out somebody without their permission. I mean, where, you know, there's a precedence of people getting away with murder because of it. Like the world's a pretty fucked up place. We got a long way to go.
Right, and we still have bathroom bills being introduced. We've got the Don't Say Gay bill being introduced down in Florida. So I mean, clearly there's a lot of work that we have yet to do. And I think we're on track here. Like, you know, kind of these discussions and get-togethers, I think, is a great way because we can all like disseminate all of this information, you know, to our contacts.
I do have to hop off here, but I will say to all of the people who are in here that are allies and who are navigating uncomfortable or awkward situations or not sure how to handle it, you can DM me and you can talk to me about it. If I have the energy to do it, I will answer you to the best that I can. I'd rather see, you know, you feel like there's a safe place to go to. I'll talk to you about being queer and my whatever. Always, you know, reach out, and I'll probably just hang out back here listening in a little bit longer and then log off. So I appreciate this, guys.
I have a quick question for those that are quoted. I guess they're called passing. Like myself, if you also have found that you have to quantify your gayness, if you do for whatever reason feel comfortable enough to come out to a coworker to say yes I am, or I'm going out and I'm going out with my girlfriend, there's this expectation that how gay are you, are you a lesbian, are you bisexual, are you what? There's this expectation that you have to quantify your gayness. How many women have you been with? All of a sudden it initiates this conversation that you never thought that you were going to be getting into. You felt comfortable enough to disclose kind of gently that you are in fact gay, but all of a sudden there's this expectation that you need to explain yourself because you're passing, as though somehow you were hiding it by the way that you do, or you were deceptive in the way that you present yourself, and therefore, you know, you need to explain yourself. And so I'm curious if anybody else has kind of had that experience, or if that's, you know, unique.
No, I've had that experience because I'm pansexual. My partner, if you look at them, you're going to see a very, very beautiful femme. I've had partners. Most of my partners have been femme, whether they have been cis or trans. But I've been with men, but as well, cis men as well. But if I tell someone I'm queer, they're like, well, like how? Like, you don't look queer. Like let's see your partner and everything like that. I'm like, all right, well, bend over and I'll show you. Like, I'm not sure how else you want me to quantify that for you. But it's one of those things where it's like, but I see that even within the community where folks who are identify as homosexual men, right? And they'll be the what are they called? Gold star gays. And there's like, oh, well, you had been with a woman, or, oh, you have children. And it's like, like, everybody's kind of saying before,
Exactly.
everybody's experience with however they identify as queer is unique to them, right? And it's not it's far be it from us to gatekeep how that goes, right? Because then we are perpetuating a lot of stereotypes, perpetuating a lot of traumas and harms that were brought onto us, onto other people, because now they don't meet our standard of what what someone who identifies the same way as we do does. And so we need to be allies within ourselves and advocates within ourselves and within our own groups around those things, as well as being allies around those who are not LGBTQ, who then feel like they have to like somehow substantiate to their own stereotypes of what they thought gay or queer was.
As you were saying that, Teresa, I was kind of wondering, like, I almost wonder how much of that overlaps with like the experience as a trans person, asked about, like the surgeries and things too. Like, I think it's almost like there's a similar motivation there too, to like rate how trans are you. And that I hadn't really thought of it that way before until you were talking about it, started to kind of hit like there almost does seem to be an element to that. Like it's almost having to justify. I mean, I know definitely within like the trans community, if such a thing exists, there is absolutely this weird gatekeep, like, how trans are you? Are you going to have surgeries or not? Are you going to take hormones or not? All the myriad of ridiculous things that people could think to talk about. And so I actually do wonder if maybe some of that does have some of that overlap too.
Absolutely. I see that so often in our own safe spaces, that there is consistent gatekeeping again amongst ourselves. And I think that when you transition that and look at that in the workplace, we're supposed to really stand at each other's side, but there seems to be this expectation that we meet each other's standards for gay. We meet each other's standard for, are you different enough to warrant my additional support? Are you gay enough? Are you trans enough? Do you present as being other and that like I do, and therefore warrant my support? And I think that that's something that is really interesting about our community, that there are these fractures that reveal themselves in workplaces where we need support the most.
Hey, everybody, this is John Behan. I am a straight white man, and I have some perspective on some of this in my attempts to become a better ally. I think one of the big challenges we have is inherent laziness of people. We like being able to have very simple categories, and when people start changing those definitions, the reaction is almost, I don't want to have to think. I don't want to have to think through my words. I don't want to think about what I have to say. I need you to fit into the categories that I've already seen, that I already know. Don't ask me to do more work. And I think one of the big challenges we have is when people become allies is to almost be aggressive in doing so and become more dangerous in that process. Sense?
To be intentionally welcoming, to be intentionally kind and intentionally respectful and acknowledging of who a person is. And aggressive intentionality. I like it.
I guess I look at more as the bad side of it is Alyssa, I want to know all of the surgeries you've had or aren't going to have so I can best represent you and supplant your representation of yourself, so I can be the person who stands in front of you and takes the bullets without realizing taking your agency away in that process. That kind of aggression, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't need to know somebody's genitals in order to, do that for somebody. It's irrelevant. That's a person. That's a human being. That is, and that's what matters.
I agree
I don't know.
100%. I'm saying that I think is a negative side of this, is that rush to now, I want to know everything, that while it may be done with the best intent, it's not the best impact. It's a negative impact.
Oh,
and that's something people have to be cautious of.
That is actually one of the things that I was thinking of when I suggested this topic in the group chat for this hot tub. Is I had a friend who was, she works at a pretty small company, just one office, but they have like a decent amount of people. I believe it's like 60, something like that. And one of the managers is in the process of transitioning. And as an attempt to be, to show good allyship, the, upper management decided to, how like offices will have birthday parties, that kind of thing. They decided to throw a gender reveal party that was extraordinarily awkward and included a lot of dead naming and a lot of inappropriate questions. And that was one of the things that kind of inspired me to say, let's have this conversation, because I feel like people are having trouble approaching this. And maybe, they had good intent, I believe. I don't think it was meant to be as absolutely mortifying and cringe as it was, because I mean, just listening to it made my soul hurt. It was very, very cringe, but I just want to know, like, there's probably a lot of people out there that want to be good allies, and just they're not doing it the right way.
I would just interjection there is, to be an ally, ask, but ask in an appropriate manner. Like, that situation should have been prevented. In like, that's like dystopian insanity that they would even do that. But ask, right? Hey, I understand you're going through this transition. How would you like us to let people in the office know? We're in a situation where you work with these people. Tell us how to move forward. All it is just kind of letting go of some of your hubris about the situation and what you think you understand, and giving the reins to the person who knows. The person who knows is going to be the person you're talking to. Hey, can I share this? Hey, could I ask you a question? It's okay. And then just being okay if you have to be corrected, right? Oh, you said the wrong pronouns. Oh, you said the wrong thing. Oh, you accidentally offensive. If you're corrected for it, don't get defensive and just say, you know what? Thank you for that perspective, and go from that way. Like, just ask is a huge step in being an ally.
I think it's important to mention that's a two-part thing, though. Asking is great, and that's important, and that's a big step. But listening to what the person is responding and taking it to heart. Some people ask just for the sake of asking and don't listen.
True. And that's where you come up with boneheaded things like gender parties like that at work.
I'm curious how one prepares for that question, though. How do you mentally prepare for the questions like that that'll come? Because that's not part of the process. There's no manual that tells you, hey, here's how I deal with, someone who's trying to be an ally, or here's how I discern between whether someone's being an asshole or someone's being an ally. There's no guide for that. So I think that it's how do you prepare yourself?
Well, you're just open, right? So to the best of your ability, you ask questions you're not prepared for all the time, every day. I say that with a certain level of certainty. You're constantly, like, people will surprise you with things a lot. And it's just a matter of, you perceive everything how you perceive things. Like, not every person walking down the street is a threat, but some people are, and sometimes you feel that threat, So it's how they say it. Like, when somebody spits the word gay or lesbian or trans out of their mouth, you know that the intention isn't right. And hopefully you understand what I mean by spit. Like, just say it with like such a just disgust, there is no way to prepare, but you can really only speak on yourself and how you feel about things. So the best thing that you can do is just be open and be able, and I know it's a little scary to do that, but be able to say, hey, not a great question, I'm not going to answer right now, but I do appreciate you trying to learn. Like just being kind of understanding, just and this kind of goes for speaking skills in general. Not everyone is great at speaking and responding and communicating, and it's just a matter of figuring out the best way that you could.
Right. I guess what I would like to know is where the hell was HR when this party was planned? What about all this?
Well, oh my God, HR. Should we dive into that hornet's nest? How
Well,
awful.
right.
I
I
mean,
think HR should know at least what not to do. I mean, they should know pitfalls of certain
well, they
things.
should. They absolutely should. But let's be real here. HR is as inept as anyone when it comes to these topics. It's amazing to me with all of DEI training and stuff that we tout around, and we talk about how great and wonderful it is, how bad it can still be, and how much of that even just and it's not exclusive even to the LGBT. I'm sure that there are people of different races who can speak to the horrible racial prejudices that they get from their HR teams. And, it's
Holy crap, right?
it's mind-numbing to me how bad, HR departments can be on this sort of thing. They don't understand how just things like that. Even one that stands out in my head from recent past was at a company I was working for where the HR team was putting together an event. And they started asking, part of it was a smaller company. And so everybody was supposed to submit a childhood picture, which, okay, that sounds great and innocuous until you consider the fact that you as an HR person know you have trans employees. So what are you asking that trans employee to do? You're asking them to share a picture of them likely presenting as a gender other than their authentic gender. How many of them do you think are going to really want to do that? And, it's just, it is amazing to me how bad HR can be with that, just as bad as anybody else, despite all the training they supposedly receive on these topics.
Right. And I think, did you tweet about this? I think I remember you or seeing somebody else tweet about this at some point.
I did tweet about it at one point. I've also tweeted about it even just because I've had people pressure me, like all the tweet threads that go on, share a picture from, 20 years ago versus now. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And stop pressing me to do it because I'm not going to do it. It was one of those ones where it was like, do it and then tag 5 people. I'm like, don't tag me in that shit. So that's one of those things to think about too. When you start doing that, what are you actually asking that person to do? Spaces and people who I would absolutely share those images with. Do I share it publicly on the internet as like essentially what becomes a before and after picture? Hell no. That's not, that brings back a lot of traumas that I don't want to share publicly.
I would actually like to ask a question about a situation like that. My default is to say, no, I'm not going to, regardless of what my own status may be, is to say, no, I'm not going to, because it's wrong to do regardless. There's been situations similar that have happened in my workplace, and by my intent in doing so is to take the attention off of it and to fight the fight myself, so as to not add one more fight on the people who have too many fights on their plate as it is. At the same time, it takes some of that focus away from them and onto me. And I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. And I'm interested in your all's thoughts on it.
I think if you explain why, it's a positive. But if you don't, if you just say, no, I'm not doing it, like that doesn't, okay, that just seems like an employee who's not participating in the situation. If you had taken the time to be like, hey, you know what, I'm not interested in doing this because I think that you're putting your employees in a really awkward position because XYZ, that is good allyship, because you're like, I, as a cis straight person, am taking a stand against this on behalf of those people and on behalf of like that. But I think if you just say like no, straight out no, they wouldn't understand what they did wrong.
No, I think that makes sense.
Hey, I am gonna get out of here, y'all. It's been a long day and I am tired. But I just want to say I'm really grateful to everybody that joined in this conversation, has shared their experiences, and I learned a lot from this convo. And I'm really just very grateful and proud to know all of you. But yeah, I'm gonna go get some sleep. Good
Go
night,
sleep
y'all.
and know that the feelings are likewise.
All right.
I think I'm going to do the same because I have new diapers to change now.
Oh, John, I want to make so many jokes, but I won't.
I'm open to them. My life is an open book, but I'm 47 years old with my first infant, so it's
Oh my
fun.
goodness.
First
It
one,
was going to be
okay,
a mean joke, so I can't do it.
I thought I was bad having number 5 at 42, but the first at 47, please go, get out.
It's a
Yeah,
Five,
marathon,
oh
not
my
a
God,
race.
5.
I felt this was important enough to sit in and listen on. It's my first space, but I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the Facts of Life reference. I think sometimes we forget that the Facts of Life era was also the Archie Bunker era. So we've come a long way, but there's a lot more to do.
Right.
I'm curious about the teacher expectation, and in the startup community, which is so big in our community, in tech, and wanting to be a part of startups, but often there is no HR component. There is no one that you would necessarily turn. You may be turning to the CEO. You may be turning to someone else in the C-suite. And I'm just curious if if people find that there is a lot of pressure to be an HR teacher, and how do you grapple with that expectation that you need to constantly guide them and you suddenly become the HR for this company?
Well, I don't know about HR teacher, but definitely the trans representative for anything that comes into question or anything around that. So I don't know if Alyssa has similar experiences or not, but
I apologize. It was actually kind of breaking up there. I didn't catch all of what you said.
well, like at work where you're some kind of like you're seen as like the trans representative or whatever, where you know you're expected to give the viewpoint on that just because you're trans or whatever.
And that's kind of what I was saying before, when it's like no more than, anyone else. None of us can speak on behalf of other people who share that particular portion of our intersectional identity, right? I mean, okay, so I know what my experience is, but yeah, I'm not the expert on trans issues in general. I can share my experience. I can share what I've seen others go through, but it's not the end all be all, solid conversation. I'm not going to have all the answers. So yeah, I mean, I definitely get that, and I get that from all over. I mean, I think that happens everywhere.
And you don't have all the answers, and that's the thing. Is it's just like sometimes you're just like you think in your head, man, can you just Google some of this stuff and try to get some differing opinions out there on this? I mean, right? It beats you down sometimes to have to come up with kind of response.
I think as like my perspective to the teacher methodology, it does have a little bit like to do with being raised as a female. We're always constantly taught to be compliant, like compliant to everything, to be kind, to be patient, to be understanding, to be thoughtful, to be whatever, all of these things. in which it's kind of turned the entire gender into this gender that's expected to always answer yes to things. And obviously that's not solely exclusive to women, and we include our trans brothers and sisters in that as well. Like you guys are always in this community, people expect us to be the educators, and I think this applies also to any racial communities as well. You're always expected to take the higher road, and you're always expected to answer the questions, and you're always expected to do that. And it's like we have all these standards that we've been put into, and all these boxes we've been put into our whole lives, and all these expectations have been put on us. But it is perfectly okay to say no. And if you're in a startup and your CEO is saying, well, help me answer this, and will help me answer that, and will help me answer that, there's a certain part where it is no longer your job to baby that person into standing and being decent. If they truly and honestly wanted to be an ally and they wanted to be a good one, they would seek the information. Like Colleen just said, Google is a great place to start. Like if they wanted to be a good ally, they could have these questions answered without having to single someone out for being different. So if you are also talking to a CEO who wants you to handhold and wants you to start becoming the HR morality spectrum in the office, then maybe that's not the right company for you. Maybe it's not the right environment, because they're obviously not making an effort to themselves, and they're expecting you to do it as like this representative of your trans, or representative of your gay, or representative of your black, or whatever. Like these are not your job, and it's okay to say no, I think is what
Right.
I think about with the teaching.
But I think on the same token, for me, I look at it sometimes as like it's an honor to be able to educate them or steer their hearts or their thoughts in a certain direction where I think it'll be positive. So, I think it just depends on the situation. Are they trying to take advantage of you and just like, get points by getting the trans or the gay perspective and then move on to the next thing once, Pride Week's over or whatever? Or are they really trying to like, make a difference? Because I found that there's a lot of people out there that have like trans family members, or they themselves are trans and they just haven't come out yet. I can't tell you how many trans women I know that are not out. So, I mean, it's just like, it just also depends on, I think, where the perspective comes from. So it can also be a learning opportunity, even though it's a frustration, it can still be an opportunity to like, teach if that's what you're looking to do.
Yeah, and it also depends on your energy as well. If you, in that day, feel like answering those questions, answer them. But if you don't, have the confidence to say, today's not the day. We'll talk another day.
I think too, like the unspoken thing that really is space to talk about is psychological safety. I was on a podcast, I guess sometime last year, and I said like if a good measure of psychological safety is do you feel comfortable coming out or speaking about being queer at work, right? And if you don't, that means that you are not psychologically safe to do so. So the fact that you have to spend those cycles to not be your whole full self at work, I mean, that's going to weigh on you. That's going to make you tired. That's going to make you not want to have those conversations. Or even if you do have those conversations, you're going to have to be very, very guarded about them. So like as an ally, as a leader, as someone who has an influence on the culture of work, if you are not building psychological safety for your employees, you're not going to be able to have those useful kinds of conversations. And no one's really going to be able to gain new perspectives on it.
I think that that's a really interesting perspective, and I value the feedback, because I think that, as Alyssa has said multiple times, this is not just an LGBTQIA issue. This is a racial issue. This is a fact that I see time and time again as an Arab American working in the government sector. There's a lot of desire to hide that just as much as there is to hide my sexuality. And so when we come across instances where we feel it's a learning opportunity for them or a teaching opportunity, there's this moment of juggling, do I out myself in an effort to teach? Do I potentially endanger myself because I don't know how they'll react, in an effort to develop the culture of the space or the workplace around me? I think that's something that is constantly being juggled, for so many, and it's something that for those that are passing, there's this constant question of, do I hide, or do I stand up and be true to myself and true to what the message is that I should be sharing. I think that that's some question to juggle that others, may be able to speak more eloquently on, but something that I've been considering for a long time.
So yeah, I think that like you mentioned, it's important that like there is a certain amount of privilege that you have access to if you are quote unquote passing, and like do you and in that privilege is safety in a lot of places, and do you make yourself less safe, right, to have that teaching moment or between yourself, and like that's a thing that's always been difficult, and even if you are out, right, but you're out but you're still quote unquote safe, um or someone feels you like I'll give you a great example. For me, it's like I am black, but I don't speak AAVE at work or anything like that. So folks will be like, hey, Tim, you're black, but you're not like black, right? You don't talk black, or whatever it is. And so it's like if you are queer and then someone's like, oh yeah, but you're not like super gay, you're not like flamboyant gay, like, so like it's like, well, they are imposing again their stereotypes of what queerness is on you, and then you have to do you have to or how do you deal with that without like going over the top to be that stereotype, or you just say like, I mean, I'm not sure, like for me I'm like, well, I'm not sure where you got the notion that all black people speak like that, but a lot of us don't. I don't. There's black people that went to Harvard that they don't speak like that either. So like there, you can challenge those.
Right, listen to me.
What's that?
Right, it's like the language doesn't speak to who you are, your intelligence. It's like
Right.
I
just
think
another projection that we put on people, I think.
I think the best thing to do it, in my experience, which can also be kind of dangerous, so we always obviously have to like do this in a selective situation, is to make them ask themselves that question. So, why do you think I'm speaking black? What is speaking black? What is being queer? What is being not queer? But like, explain to me what your perspective is so that I can course correct you, because that's insane.
Well, but that's assuming that you're like speaking with a rational person, though, right?
That's the problem. That's the problem about all of it.
So how do you establish safety with an irrational person? How do you separate yourself from that dynamic where you're like, this person's just not going to get it no matter what I say, but I need to establish my boundaries and ensure my own safety and choose not to engage with this person anymore in this way, even though I need to engage with them professionally?
I think that you, in that question, answered that question. So you just said, like, this is a boundary of mine, and once they're being irrational, you know what? We don't see eye to eye. I appreciate you as a coworker, but I think we should probably stop talking about these conversations. How they react, we obviously can't plan for every reaction, but I think the way you just said it was perfectly eloquent. Like, here's the situation.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the spot I was into. I think for as much as you can, it's state, this is my boundary, this is where it is, and I'm done with this conversation. Is it going to stop it? No, not in the least, right? I mean, those types of irrational people who are going to speak that way to you because you're queer, because you're Middle Eastern, because you're black, because whatever. They're not going to stop that, and that's the challenging. I mean, that's the horrible part of it, right? Because it doesn't stop, and those people who are irrational are the ones who their conversation, the things they say, it's not rooted in logic or even faulty logic. It's just rooted in hatred. And that makes such a big difference. It's when you realize that like, all right, it's not that their logic is faulty, it's just they don't give a shit about logic, because what they're arguing isn't about logic at all. It's about hatred. It's about their absolute disgust for the fact that I don't look like them, I don't talk like them, I don't I don't love the same people they love, whatever it is. That's the challenge. And of course, when we can talk to it for days on end about how awful the workplace still is for anybody who doesn't match that ideal, or that dominant class.
It also isn't your job to fix broken people in the sense of, like, these people and their crazy opinions. They're not your responsibility. Do the best you can to be safe and disengage and move away from it. That's like literally all you can do, and you won't change their minds. The difference between, in a conversation between somebody who's attempting to be an ally and attempting to be kind, and who's just being an asshole. So disengage from them. Don't bring, just like you wouldn't just a random stranger who, if you weren't queer or if you were just within your community, if you get a bad vibe from someone, you're not going to be friends with them and share your family pictures. You're not going to share your personal information with them. Just like how we protect ourselves on social media. Like, most of us don't post where we live and things like that. And like, we do the best that we can to keep ourselves anonymous and safe. Do the same thing with that person. They just happen to be a coworker. But with that said, to leave actually for real, thank you guys. I appreciate this so much. Alyssa, it was nice to actually speak to you, and Colleen and all of you who were speaking the first time. I would love to keep in contact and build the community and all that good stuff. So thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
I am also going to get going because I have to teach jiu-jitsu first thing in the morning, so I need to get some sleep.
I appreciate it. Good to see you, Tim. Thanks for popping in, too.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I think it's important for allies, as far as any of those problems go. It's nice to have allies at work if you feel like you're being bullied or what have you, or at least online. I know that's helped me quite a bit, is having a community.
Do you ever find that your allies go too far?
Yes.
Speaking on your behalf or fighting your battles for you. I know that I see this regularly for women in the workplace, talking about how this person needs to defend me, or this person went ahead and defended me before I even had a chance to say anything, or they fought my battle for me before I had the chance to even decide if it was a battle I wanted to fight. So I'm curious for other people, and Alyssa, you were the one who inspired my question on this, is how do you deal with an overzealous ally? And I think we've all experienced this, especially during Pride Month, where they really want to prove themselves as being an ally.
Yeah, it's interesting to bring it up because I had a similar thought about this when John, and I think John left now, but when John was talking earlier, he kind of started down this path too. And again, it's one of those situations of, it's such a fine line, right? Because you want the allies there, and you don't want to always be, as anyone of any marginalized class, you don't it shouldn't always be on the people in the marginalized class to do all the battling, right? We shouldn't always be the ones that have to fight for equality. And yet the reality is, allies can step on the toes, and you don't allies seen out of turn or stepping in. And I've seen that, right? Like I've seen that where literally just a week ago, it was a black coworker was speaking out about a behavior that someone had exhibited, and a very well-meaning coworker jumped in on top and cut them off and started speaking for them. So I mean, those are obvious situations, right? And that's an easy one to say, hey, stop. But as far as how I deal with it, I mean, for me personally, if I know that they're an ally and they're trying, if I can stop them in the moment, I will. But it kind of depends on what the scenario is. I might be able to stop them very publicly and just say, hey, you know what? Let me address that. It might not be something where it's the way I want to do it. A lot of times I will just pull them aside after and say, hey, you know what? I really appreciate it, but look, you kind of took that out of my hands, and you really actually overreacted to a situation. I mean, it's amazing. There's so many things. Like if we can just talk to each other, how much of a difference that can actually make. So we had a couple new people pop in as speakers, and feel free to unmute and speak up.
Hey, this is Adrian.
Hey, Adrian.
Hey, I mostly just wanted to say thank you for doing this as the dad of two. I'm I think in a slightly different category here as a dad of two LGBT plus kids. It's I've learned a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, but almost all of it has been directly from my kids or just Googling and stuff like that. So it's really helps me to hear folks at an older age talking about their experiences with it, because I think that's something that my kids don't think about that much at this point. I've got one 15-year-old who's non-binary and has a trans boyfriend, and then my oldest, who just turned 18, is a, well, I guess I can call her a woman now, right? Like trans woman. And yeah, it's I don't know how y'all have the energy some days, because when somebody finds out you're a parent and they go, "Oh my God, how many kids do you have?" You're like, that's the first question. It's how many kids? And then it's, do you have boys or girls? I'm like, Jesus. Like, I don't know if I have the, I've just met you. Like, this is our icebreaker getting to know each other questions. Literally, this happened to me today. And I'm on speakerphone. My kids are in the other end of the conversation. I'm sure they're rolling their eyes also. And it's like, very first thing I'm saying to somebody, a new coworker I'm working with, and, I don't know them at all. I don't know how they're going to react to this. I live in East Tennessee. So generally, when I go through the explanation, I don't get a whole lot of positive responses. So yeah, I mean, y'all, I don't know how you have the energy. I have to deal with such a tiny fraction of what you probably have to deal with. But thank you for, main thing I wanted to say was thank you.
Hey, this is Nikki. And to build on that, something else that's exhausting is just because you've birthed children that you're any less queer. I feel like people have heard that I've had children and suddenly I'm less non-binary for some reason, and that is frustrating.
Right, the gatekeepers in any community, it's like you have to kind of watch out for that, and they're going to be there. It's always going to be like I don't want to say a barrier or a minefield, but a challenge, I think, is the gatekeepers, the people that say you don't pass, you're not trans enough, or what have you. I think Alyssa mentioned some of that earlier, how our community has quite a bit of that still, within just the trans community itself.
Absolutely. Alyssa did mention that, and very well.
So I have a comment on Teresa's question, and also something that I think was a little bit earlier in the space as far as like speaking up on behalf of other people. By the way, cis male. So it was a new experience for me to have someone close to me begin transitioning and then inform everyone like what the new pronouns were, but also explicitly say, I do not want you to correct people on my behalf. So just general thoughts is like people are very upfront with their pronouns. I understand it's not easy to be brief in the same sort of way as far as like how you want other people to interact with you. That's not something you can just like broadcast in your Twitter bio. Setting a precedent for that sort of thing really does help. Especially I got into security, and before that, my previous work history. A lot of what motivates me is about protecting people, standing up for them. And so I want to be that person. I want to be an ally, and I want to like help share some of that burden. But it's incredibly important to like respect the person's wishes and listen and just shut up when it's appropriate.
Right. So I guess did you have a question there? Were you asking about like someone that wasn't willing to defend their own pronouns, that was just like really flexible? Or?
No, just sharing my own experience for context. As far as like whether you should speak up on someone's behalf, and like it's often unclear about what that person's wishes are, right? And unless you already have that context shared, right?
For me, if I'm not defending my own pronouns, I don't want someone else to. And that may be my personal preference, but I don't know. Other guys share.
Yeah, I'm pretty adamant about correcting people with my pronouns for sure, but I know others that don't. They're flexible. They're like, I don't care if they call me he or him, or even use my dead name. That's no big deal. And I think that's just that they're a really passive person, that they're willing to like be flexible like that. And that's totally their right. And what they're trying to do is think of the feelings of the other person versus their own feelings. They don't think that it's that big a deal to be correctly gendered or correctly named or what have you to them. It's worse to them to see the other person like be embarrassed or be harmed themselves. So it's interesting. But yeah, I do know a number of people like that will not correct others. That will just, they don't expect you to do it for them. It's just that it's not that big of a deal to them. They'd rather just not cause the conflict.
I'm curious for those that are parenting, for the parents in the room, how you handle teaching your children to advocate for whether it's their pronouns, whether it's their identity, whether it's how they choose to define and see themselves. How do you instill that power to advocate in
I
them?
think personally, my kids are older. But
I have a trans son, and he's 10 years old. He's in 4th grade, and we have had multiple talks with the school about how that is his identity and that is what we're doing. And they're pretty okay with it. Sometimes they need some reminders that, you know, misgendering him is not okay. But for me, it's whatever his truth is, that's what we do.
Right, and I was just going to say that, my kids are older, so, they were teenagers when I came out, so, they were more than willing to, like, advocate for me or whatever, because they already had trans friends. But I think younger kids, I've seen gamut of, like, some kids where they've struggled with, like, the, dad coming out as a trans woman or something like that, but, on the most, I think kids just pick it up and they run with it. You don't really have to advocate for kids to be like, hey, use your pronouns, or I think they start seeing that, they start understanding that that's just how it's done, and they just, kind of run with it on their own. At least that's, what I've seen.
I feel like that's definitely fair. I know that my children are more rabid advocates for my pronouns than even I am. Like you were saying before, some people are willing to be flexible. I'm a little bit more from that. Like I don't want people to feel awkward, so I might not necessarily correct them. But I have a lesbian daughter and a trans son, and they are very rabid advocates for, if people misgender me, they're like, no, they are them, So I feel like the kids are even better off than we are in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, mirror the same exact experience. My kids seem to have very strong support groups. They have trans friends. They have a good group of people around them. And really, the only time they need me to do something, if it's more of a formal, like dealing with a school kind of thing, or I'm an adult and you're a kid type of situation, which generally, yeah, they're they don't need my help most of the time. And they know they can ask for it.
Do you find that that there's a lot of needing to temper your own fears from just, I mean, even a generation ago, or for anyone who's experienced severe repercussions from being who they are? I think that this younger generation is living in a golden hour, so to speak, for being who they are. It's not perfect, but it's entirely different than what those of us from generations previously have experienced. So I'm curious, even for those like Alyssa, who get asked all the time, what do I do about my trans daughter, my trans son, my non-binary child? How do you temper your fears because based in your own experiences, and not scare the other parent or scare your child, and but still instill in them, confidence but wariness?
Well, just like you said, the magic word there, tempering it, is trying to recognize that you can't be all doom and gloom and be like, yeah, it was really sucked coming up and, before we came out and all that. But, I think you have to know your audience and then try to be a little bit positive about it, because we are moving forward. And, like you said, things are getting better slowly. So the next generations, I mean, I'm amazed at how the, 20 and younger generation, 20-year-olds and younger, just, how they are with trans or gay or, poly or any of this. They don't care. It's not anything to them. And I love it.
Yeah, I mean, the two main places that we have had issues is the school. Again, I mentioned I'm in East Tennessee. It's not the most tolerant area, and both my kids are in high school. Not the most tolerant period in anybody's lives. As far as their peers go. So I'm about to have to take my youngest out of high school and enroll them in online learning, just because the high school can't control the other kids. There's Instagram accounts dedicated to just outing people and nothing else. So it's an awful environment. So schools have been an issue. And my ex-wife's family, her mom insists on this year was really hurtful to the kids, insisted on dead naming them on their Christmas presents, and when talking to them, just refuses to use their current names.
That's terrible.
Oh my
So
God, that's awful.
yeah, those are the two main challenges there. Everything else, it's like the rest of the world has moved on and gets it, and you just have these two pockets, where that just seem like they're in the dark ages. And I know things have moved fast, but not that fast,
I
Like,
totally agree because I'm in Western Pennsylvania. So
oh,
again,
yeah,
another not so progressive area. And at home, we have no issues. But at school, I've had to contact the principal several times because teachers were dead naming my trans son in class, and that's just not okay.
yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I agree totally.
Can I ask, since you all have kids that are in like these middle and high school age, do you see them being harassed under those conditions more from like the staff and faculty that's teachers versus the students?
No,
Not the kids.
no,
Still the
the kids are
kids.
worse. The kids are way worse. In fact, my son just got moved recently. The seats get moved every couple weeks. And he got moved in between two people who refused to gender him properly. And no, it's kids that have misguided ideas.
Yeah, the adults, it's more of a I was born in the 50s and can't learn new things, where it's, like they make some attempt, maybe some of them are lazy about it, but with the kids, it's just absolute malice.
Well,
For malice
that's
sake.
disheartening because I kind of looked at the kids as like this hopeful next generation of, they were a little more flexible and less rigid in those kind of viewpoints, but apparently not, from what you're saying.
It's
Well, I mean,
unfortunate.
absolutely, there are kids who are, but it's like I think a lot of the U.S. and our culture in general, like there's just a wider divide between them.
Well, so I guess let me ask you all this then. Would you consider inspiring your children to be like allies if they are not like gay or lesbian or trans, if they're not members themselves, if they're cis heterosexual, whatever, would you consider talking to them about, like standing up for somebody? I mean, because it's the same thing. I mean, really, if somebody was just like, discriminating against somebody because of their gender or not their gender, but their race or something to that effect or their ethnicity. I mean, I would expect my kids to speak up and, say something about that.
So I will say the only
Absolutely.
time that my daughter, my oldest daughter, who is Miss Rule follower, Miss 4.0, the only time she's gotten in trouble at school was because she punched someone who made a homophobic slur. Like the kids that
Good
are
girl.
allies are in it. They're in it to win it, you know?
Right. It just makes me sad to hear the violence, we come into violence. But I
Yeah, I
do
mean,
appreciate the sentiment for sure.
yeah, me and my ex-wife raised our kids like that from the beginning, long before they came out as transgender or non-binary, to be like that. And I mean, we've had, gay people in the LGBT people in the extended family. So, it was something that absolutely came up when they were younger. And yeah, there's no doubt in my mind if my kids weren't LGBT plus themselves, that they would absolutely stand up for others, or were.
Right. It looks like Ral has their hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the high school children and just maybe ask if you guys thought that the political system maybe was a part of why high schoolers are more, maybe both ways, either more likely to stand up or be an ally or more likely to be on the other end of the spectrum because, high school children are targeted through political stuff just because if they're within a certain number of years before turning 18 and an election season is coming up, they're old enough to understand a lot of the same garbage rhetoric and stuff that you would find in the media. And if you thought that maybe it was less just an age group of kids being awful in high school, and maybe that the socio-political environment in which we all kind of live, that children, I guess, underage teens, later teens before they turn 18 are being targeted, because they're going to be voters.
The first "Don't Say Gay" bill came from my county, so I'll just put it at that. But yeah, yes to that statement. I think it's the political climate. We're in the Bible Belt, and I'm sure these kids are getting a lot of it from their parents. I grew up here. I've been here for since I was 7 years old, and I heard stuff that parents and kids said back then. So there's no doubt in my mind that it's a combination of both politics and what kids hear from their parents growing up here.
Well, it's like we live in, I think most of us here on this call are from the United States. I wanted to say that we live in two parallel Americas, right? It's like parallel universes, but we clearly live in two parallel Americas, depending on which news sources you follow, whether they're independent, liberal, or right, or conservative. So it's like people are in completely different worlds in this country.
It's absolutely true.
And even the rest of the world, it seems, too.
For the kids that are going to school and they're listening to their peers, and some of their peers are hearing things that they're believing from mass media and social media, and my kids come home and they ask me, what does this mean? And it's disturbing to hear what they're hearing at school.
I think the sad thing too, maybe to add to that a little bit, is that all media is for profit. There's no really other reason why a media outlet exists other than to make money, and that's sort of what determines the viewership that they have, determines the content that is on television, media channels, or found online or in the culture. And it's sort of disgusting to me in a lot of ways that capitalism plays a direct role in potential violence and actual physical harm coming to children, to not just to children, but just I guess on the topic that we're talking about right now, to children, to their parents, to their friends and family, just to turn a dollar is kind of disgusting to me, I guess.
Hey, everybody, I'm just going to jump in here really quick and say I do have to run, but I really appreciate the conversation from everybody, and I appreciate everyone, sharing your perspectives and being a part of it.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Alyssa.